Hey everyone, you're listening to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Mindy and Julie to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're joined by special guest Tiana Blasdel to talk about teens and dating. As a longtime youth pastor's wife, Tiana has observed lots of teen relationships, and she has some great advice to share with us. Let's get started. Hey guys, great to see you again this week.
Hey girls, good to see you.
We have a very special guest with us today, Tiana Blasdel. She's a longtime friend of all of ours, and we're so excited to have her on the podcast today. Hey
Yes,
Tiana, welcome.
Hey, I'm so excited.
Hey guys, this is so fun. I love it. I just love seeing your faces and hearing your voices. So.
Oh, it's great. So Tiana's husband was the youth pastor of our church here in Nashville for several years. And at that time, all of us went to church here. Mindy lived in Brentwood. Julie and I, we still were at that same church, and Tiana was there too. And so those were really fun years we all got to spend together. But he left that position about 6 years ago to become the camp director for an awesome camp in upstate New York called Maple Ridge Ranch. And now their family lives in Florida during the school year and in New York all summer at the camp. Now, who's jealous of that? I know I am.
I definitely am right now. Absolutely.
In Florida, they continue to serve students in their local church where Tiana co-teaches senior girls. Dwayne and Tiana have been married for 19 years and have 4 daughters, ages 13, 14, 15, and 17. So they are busy. Tiana's experience as a youth pastor's wife for 13 years and a camp director's wife for 6 has put her in contact with lots of teenagers. And that's why I think she's an excellent guest to have on to talk about our topic today, teens and dating.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. We'll see if I know anything.
I want to hear all that Tiana has to say, especially like my daughter's in college now, so I'm in boy territory. So also wanting to know what Julie has to say, Marie, having gone before me. So yeah, bring it on.
Yes, I need all the help I can get. We are smack dab in the middle of all of this. So.
Right.
Tiana, I don't know if you remember this, but one day we were sitting at the pool and it was a youth fellowship. And Andrew was interested in a girl, and you were like, Julie, what are you going to do about this? I just can't wait to watch this. And I remember thinking, oh, no, people are watching.
I've been very spoiled with many, many years of watching.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's so fun when it's not your own kid.
Yes,
That's right.
It's so
That's
fun
right.
when it's not yours. Yep.
So true.
All right. So what would you guys consider a healthy dating life in your own teens?
Well, I guess I'll start out looking back because I have 2 children that are actually married now. And each one of them only dated 2 people, one of which they married. So I feel like we had very little drama, very little heartbreak. And so I feel like we came through it pretty unscathed.
Right.
But I think we talked about it a lot of talking, a lot of dialogue. For the most part, they were in healthy relationships with like-minded people. And it didn't start too young. Maybe we just got lucky. I don't know.
Right. Well, you still have one that's not married, so he may give you the drama that you're looking for.
I know. That'll probably happen.
How about you, Mindy?
Well, like with any question, when you've asked me to define something, I actually wrote a definition down, and you guys are going to make fun of me for it. I'm already prepared. So,
is there a definition under healthy dating life?
I make them up. It's like facts according to Mindy, and like half of it's probably wrong.
I'll just edit it out if I don't like it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
Exploring a new relationship and the protection of both sets of parents within agreed upon guidelines where both kids are learning more about one another, more about themselves, while keeping the long-range goal of marriage in mind, so that if at any point one person knows this would not be a good marriage partner, they have the courage to walk away.
Okay, that's good. That's really good.
I like a lot of what you said, Mindy. I think for me, ultimately, the goal of dating is marriage eventually. So I think that kind of backpedaling to the beginning, it's almost like you have to keep the goal of marriage in mind, even if you are younger, starting dating. But at the same time, I think keeping the relationships light until the idea of marrying that person actually could happen or, is a serious idea, so that you can back out and you can, you're not backing out or breaking up and having a big part of yourself taken away from you, or just a lot of drama and, things you can't go back and change.
Right.
So I think the definition really changes depending on whether you're talking about somebody like in high school versus, college or beyond. I mean, I think college and beyond, certainly it's intentional dating. I mean, for me personally, I just think lots and lots of serious relationships can be really difficult emotionally, spiritually. I'm not sure it's supposed to be that way. But at the same time, I think there's some room for casual, like, let's get to know some people before you're in that stage. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I really like what you said about keeping it light until it would be a time that maybe that relationship might someday, because obviously, if you're dating as a junior in high school, you're not going to be getting married. So let's keep it lighter, in those early years, and then not really progress to anything more serious until we are closer to getting to marriageable age.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've told my girls. I don't want to tell them that, oh, you're definitely not going to marry someone you meet in high school, because honestly, I know too many people where that's happened. And and my husband and I started dating, he was 17, I was 18. So not far off of that. But at the same time, I tell them, I'm like, if you started dating someone as a junior and you actually do get married, that's still a lot of years away from that happening. In other words, best case scenario, this ends in, just a God honoring, amazing marriage. I mean, that's just a lot of years to be in that relationship. And so starting off light, even if that is the end goal, kind of is still wise,
Sure. Yeah, I definitely like that. At what age do you start the process of your kids dating? When do you start talking about it? Group dates, dates alone? Did you guys have any specific ages, or did you just kind of take it as it came up?
I think your kid is going to lead the process in this. And as a parent, no matter what the issue is, whether it's dating or school or a club or anything, if your child is interested in it, you better start talking about it. So I don't care what age that is. It could be middle school. And I know that sounds really scary, but if your child is interested in dating or talking about somebody, then it's time to start talking.
I would agree.
Did you guys have a certain time or age that you said, okay, well, if you want to go out with groups of girls and boys, this would be what we think is an appropriate time?
And we didn't really consider it before age 16. But I still think dating is more of a privilege, not a right. Not like, oh, I've turned 16, so anything goes. It still was going to be based on their behavior, their maturity, their trustworthiness, in their other relationships with friends. And they did a lot of things in groups with boys and girls. There was an age minimum, but then it was still going to be looked at just how they were behaving and their maturity.
I would completely echo that. First of all, as far as when you start talking to them, I think as soon as possible, honestly. I think the more we talk about it, the better. So I don't know, girls probably get to that point sooner than boys. I'm not sure. But I think, I've had start having crushes on boys at 10 and 11 years old, which side note, I think it's important not to make them feel like that's a bad thing or a wrong thing. I do think it's very natural. But yeah, I think for us, they've known all along that don't even ask before you're 16. But then that doesn't mean you automatically get to date when you're 16. It's just going to depend on you and where you're at and maturity and can we trust you and where are you spiritually, all of those things.
Right. I guess we've kind of approached it a little bit differently in that we have allowed friend groups almost that are made up of boys and girls. We've allowed them to do activities together. If it was 6 or 8 kids, a mixture of girls and boys, they've gotten together to play at someone's house in their game room for the night, or maybe they've gone to the movies, or maybe they've all met at Panera to eat, or things like that before they're 16. But we are trying to hold off on one-on-one dating a little bit longer. But I have to honestly just say, you're fighting against the crowd. To try and do that.
Culture.
Yeah.
And so there's so many steps to dating. And I was just talking to another mom about this, and I was like, you know what? Once you open the door on an activity, especially with your oldest child, you cannot go back. It's really, really hard to close back that door. All the different steps of dating. I think the group thing is a great idea. But once you say, okay, well, you can go do this with this one person of the opposite sex, well, the rest of the younger siblings are watching. They're going to call you on it. Like you almost really have to go in having some sort of plan that you can then be flexible with, because each of your children is so different. Like Tiana said, I mean, where are they at spiritually? What's your relationship like with that child? Because that will change what that dating relationship looks like.
Right.
Yeah. And even with that one child that you're dealing with, once you say group dates, then it's like, well, that threshold's been crossed. So what's next? They're going to kind of ramp it up. You know that you're not just going to stay there for very long. So it's just hard to really let go of that first threshold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, especially if your children are really close in age, because I felt like, because ours were all a year apart, we really needed to like have a plan that would kind of account for maybe different levels of maturity. Whereas if they were spread out 4 years apart or something, you maybe could take it as it came with each individual child.
Yeah. What do you do if your child wants to date? Like, say they've reached the age that their older sibling started to do like group dates or dates alone, but you don't really feel like this second child is maybe quite mature enough. But they're saying, well, hey, I'm as old as so-and-so was. Have you guys run into that?
Well, I think, honestly, we've had a lot of different activities or different privileges in our house that has been dependent on maturity.
Oh, okay.
And I have had to say no to some, even though their older siblings may have gotten that privilege, as far as having a phone or even babysitting, just different things that I'm like, I have to feel like you're mature enough. So the age for me, for example, for babysitting is 13, but only if I feel like, you're ready to do that. And so I don't think it will go very well in their eyes, but I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with saying no, even though I've said yes to somebody else.
I would evaluate what is the driving force of their desire. Is it peer pressure? Is it looking for approval or love? Is there something missing in their life that they're not getting? Or is it really just a general sincere desire to get to know somebody better? So I think as a parent, you do have to evaluate, well, what is the driving force? Mm-hmm. Why do they want to date?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and it also depends on their age, I think, because when my son started dating his now wife, he was 17. Right. And I felt like he knew how we felt about that we thought it was too serious, too young. And he knew that very clearly, and she did too. And I don't think they really understood that at that time. Maybe they still don't, but because it didn't have anything to do with the person. It was just their age. But we knew that we couldn't control Andrew's feelings. I mean, those were real feelings for her. Yeah. And for us to just forbid a 17-year-old to do something, we just didn't feel like that was going to be the best for our relationship with him. So we thought, okay, we're just going to be here to guide and lead and help him through this. Because it's going to be like you said, it's going to be 5 or 6 years, and it was. But I think it turned out better that we were willing to go along and help them through that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How involved are you in your teens' dating relationships? This is actually something that I'm sure a lot of people do a lot of different ways. So I think just kind of hearing how people do it can kind of give us ideas on, oh, well, I never thought about being that involved, or, oh, maybe I should step back a little bit. I think hearing other experiences is really helpful for us. I
think first, the most important thing to me is just I'm here to secure the boundaries. I think that just because my child has, the privilege of dating, I've allowed that. That doesn't mean that I've lost all power in the situation. And so guarding those boundaries as far as where they are, if they're alone, who they're with, how much time they're spending together, how much time they're texting and talking, and just how deep the relationship gets. I think you can't control feelings, but there's things we can do on our end to make sure it doesn't get too serious too fast. But also just to listen. I think for me is to kind of listen to where she's at and just kind of guide her through questions like, what do you like? What do you not like? And kind of get a chance to talk about those things. I think we have to talk about the stuff that's mundane and silly and not important. if we want to be able to talk about the important stuff too and want them to come to us.
Like when we were growing up, you could definitely tell how much time someone had spent talking on the phone. Like if you were on the phone for 2 hours with this person every night, your parents would know about it. I find the texting to be hard. And I feel like when my child is 16, 17, 18, I don't really not that I don't have the right, but I feel like it is kind of an invasion of privacy to read every text. So how do you monitor that?
That is a very good question. And in fact, it's funny. We've recently just talked about how, I do feel like with my oldest daughter, who's 17 and a half, she's earned the right to probably have more privacy when it comes to texting and things like that. So that's been less and less.
Okay.
But I mean, at the same time, we kind of have, we have an all one floor kind of smaller house that's really open. And so
Sure.
I know when she's on the phone a lot too.
Okay.
That's a little more helpful, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. How have you guys handled that, Julie and Mindy? Like, how involved are you in your teen dating relationships that are going on in your house?
I kind of thought the mental picture that I had was as soon as they like somebody, it's almost like they're holding hands with this person that they like. And then you and your husband are holding their hands as well. Like you're all in it together. Mm-hmm. Bryce's mantra was, if you like somebody, I'm involved. We're involved. He and I have been talking to Abby Ray about dating since middle school. I mentioned that earlier. She was interested in talking about it in middle school. She wasn't dating in middle school, but we were already helping her navigate relationships with boys. There was a time we were checking the texts, and it was often. She couldn't FaceTime until she was older, but then she had to be in a room that was close by, kind of like Tiana's house. Mm-hmm. She mentioned it being open. So, we would be in one area of that level and she would just be in another area close by. It was just little steps at a time. Well, then there's other things on your teens' phones that you need to be aware of. There's Snapchat. Those pictures disappear. You're not going to be able to see what they sent the other person. And so that's something you have to navigate and decide if they're going to be able to have Snapchat. They've got Instagram. Well, I get on all of this stuff. If my kids have it, I have it on my phone so I can follow them. Well, then your kid's going to go out and make another account that you don't follow them on, that you don't know about. So You're never going to be able to fully be in charge of their online presence. Marie, you mentioned feeling like it's a little bit of an invasion of privacy. Well, when our kids are at home, we're going to do random checks of their phones and we will read the texts. Now, more time might pass in between those checkpoints, but there's conversations after every time they have together. And so Abby Ray even mentioned, Dad would ask me all the physical questions, like he would ask me about love. What did I think about love? And, it's more than just physical. It's are they saying, I love you? How do you feel about that? How are you going to navigate that? The child does something then that, is not trustworthy in the relationship. You really have to pull the reins back in. It's almost like you really need to enjoy your kids while they're in middle school, because when they hit the dating relationship and you're actively, walking through, you have to step back in, and be so intentional. You have to be on the ball all the time. There is not a point in time where you can let the reins loose. Well, now Abby Ray's in college and she can choose whether she tells us about somebody or not. But she's actually been more picky since she left our house than she was in our house, because she had the safety net of us.
Right. Yeah. You said that you felt like Andrew and Kayla's relationship, Julie, was a little bit too serious for their age. So how involved did you try to be in that?
Like you were saying, Tiana, I just made sure that I helped with the boundaries, setting the boundaries. I was here a lot. I was home. I was present. They were never here when I wasn't home. Same thing at her house. And they even came to us at one point and said, look, we were really interested in keeping our relationship pure after they'd been dating a little while, because I think they knew this is going to be a long thing. And they came to us and asked for help and accountability in that. And so we had a lot of conversations before dates and after dates, and just help them set up those boundaries and keep them accountable. And, that was something that they asked for. I don't know how that would have looked if we were just trying to enforce that on them.
Right.
Like early on, we would start talking about, what are your boundaries going to be? How important it was to make those decisions ahead of time. Make a decision once and for all, not in the heat of the moment.
Right.
How far am I going to go? If I'm going to be alone in a car or wherever, And don't push that boundary. Don't go right up to it. Stay back from it. Don't put yourselves continually putting yourselves in tempting situations and expect to be able to withstand it, because you won't.
What are some of the hard and fast rules? So we've mentioned some, and then what are some things that are more fluid? And maybe even you've had hard and fast rules that you then relaxed as time went on.
The biggest hard and fast rule for me is just who. We still get to say yes or no to who this person is. So yes, you may be mature, we think you're ready, but we have to agree to the person. First of all, a lot of the things that Julie mentioned already would be ours, little to no time alone. We're not sitting in cars for long periods of time. Those kinds of boundaries are the hard, fast. A hard, fast rule that we have is that you will remain friends with this person. Like for us, that's part of it, just especially being in student ministry and stuff like that, is that first we're friends. And, a lot of times we're going to be friends with the parents. You guys are going to church together or, school together or whatever. And I just think we have said that with any of the girls, like no matter what, you are going to be friends. So you better make sure whatever you're doing in this relationship is going to secure that. And there's not going to be drama as far as that goes. But I think that the more fluid things is a lot of just like personality and taste. I have to look at the person and are they mature in their relationship with the Lord? Are they responsible? Are they treating her well? Like those are the things that are important. I happen to like this particular boy, but I know that, we're not all going to be attracted to the same kind of people or same kind of personality and just that kind of stuff. I think that I don't want to get involved in. That's really completely their decision to say about that.
I really liked thinking about this. And the more you deal with dating relationships, you realize like the hard and fast rules are kind of this umbrella, this overarching big idea. It's not so much in the details. One of the things I thought of was that it really just depends on your relationship with the child. There's so many conversations. We've all mentioned that already, but that mom and dad have full veto rights with the person or with any activity. One of the rules that we developed with Abby Ray that I really liked that we will continue. If you're in a dating relationship, you still need to be spending time with your girlfriends and with your family. So like with looking at a weekend, if she wanted to go out on a date one night, okay, fine. If we agree to that, great. Well, then you're not going out again that same weekend. You're going to spend time with your girlfriends and then you're going to make some time for your family because it's so easy when kids get into relationships and just look at the culture. I mean, these kids are practically living together in high school. I wanted to make sure that she wasn't just all about her boyfriend because it's so easy to get into that obsessive type of relationship fast. And so helping her protect and making sure she was spending time with friends and then also spending time with family was crucial to us.
And they have to really need parental guidance in that because they're never going to monitor it very well. They're going to, you're going to point it out and they'll be like, oh, we've hardly spent any time together. Or they don't see it all from the outside perspective.
Right.
I completely agree with that 100%. I mean, that's probably beyond the physical stuff and emotional and spiritual stuff. That's probably my number one kind of priority is just that your social life, your family life, your, just normal activities stay intact. This person is not going to be your life. I don't care how much we all love the person, or how perfect they are. Right. It's just not going to be that way.
Right. This was a question from my son's girlfriend. They're in college, and so she sent me this. She said, how much questioning do you do to make sure your child doesn't rebel against you, but also feels safe in confiding in you? Which that's a big question. That's a fine line to walk.
Yeah,
it is. Well, that starts early with your child. I don't think you can wait until you're in a dating relationship and then decide to have a relationship with your child and start questioning them. You need to be like, feeding into that relationship their whole lives. And so I think that if you show that you're respectful of them and their feelings and validate their feelings, though tempering them with wisdom and guidance, that relationship will grow so that they're not surprised when you're questioning them later when it's really important.
I would definitely agree. I mean, I do think it goes back to what we said before. It's just like, if you want to talk about the big things, if you want your child to talk to you about the big things, you're going to have to spend a lot of time talking about the little things and the silly things. I'm constantly asking my girls, so who are you crushing on right now? Or, and just to make it fun and light and not so serious, and know that they can say that stuff and not be judged. Having a lot of little conversations before the big conversations.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I love what you said about asking your girls those questions about, okay, who are you crushing on now? That's something that Abby and I have so much fun still talking about. And it really helped her grow as she learned about herself and about, what she values. Because as a parent, you want to know what your kid likes. That's what I tell Abby and Grant. I just want to know what you value. That says a lot about who you are. And I'm still learning who you are.
Mm-hmm. I think that one thing I've always tried to do is if my kids do come to me and confide in me about a problem, that is the time when it's like, I'm not going to attack or punish for whatever problem it is. I'm not going to make them regret telling me. I mean, sure, I might be shocked, or I might be disappointed, or I might be sad, or I might be scared about what they've told me, but I'm just so happy that they told me.
When Kayla and Andrew came to me and asked, or me and John, and asked for help and accountability in their relationship, it scared me to death, because I thought, you've got a long time. This problem is too big. This is just, I don't know, how you're going to make it. But I didn't voice any of that. But I just started praying, Lord, what can I do? How can I help? And the first thing he told me to say was just, thank you for coming to me. That was huge, that they wanted us involved.
To me, that would make me feel good, because I'm like, I have all the facts. I know,
Right. Once the fear left me, it's like, okay, I can deal with this.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's normal. I think it helps really to think about ourselves too at that age. And I don't know, as far as just not being shocked by the things they tell us or whatever. I mean, it's easy to be too removed from that stage, But when you kind of think of where you were, it's like, oh, yeah, okay. There was many times my husband and I were glad when we were dating that we were long distance dating. That made it much easier. So yeah.
Sometimes we have to protect our kids physically. We have physical boundaries in the dating relationship. And we've talked about this a little bit, but protecting them emotionally during the dating process, you want to talk about getting hurt. You want to talk about that feelings might change. Like you said before, you want to keep an eye on how much time they're spending with the boyfriend or girlfriend and set limits on that. Do you guys have any other advice for how you go about protecting kids emotionally? Because they can really be all in very quickly.
Spending a lot of time talking about how, your relationship with the Lord always has to be the most important thing, which sounds so cliche and trite or whatever, but even in marriage, I have to keep that perspective and that proper order. My husband is not going to fill the needs that I have. Only the Lord can do that. And so even in relationships, even dating relationships, you kind of have to start that pattern off young to know that this person is not going to complete me. This is not the answer to everything. At the same time, I kind of don't know that you can protect them. High school, you have a little more control, like we said about things getting too serious too soon and that kind of thing. But at some point, they're going to be in a relationship and they're going to be vulnerable. And really that's between them and the Lord. And it's really the Lord's job to, kind of meet those needs and catch them when they fall, and we're just there to kind of listen and guide and encourage and pray.
I started thinking it was just girls that really get emotionally involved, but boys do it too. It really is both genders that you have to watch. Is my child just insecure in themselves? Do they feel like they have to have a boyfriend to make themselves complete? I know so many guys and girls of my kids' friends that they constantly have a boyfriend or they stay with somebody they don't really care for because they're afraid. They're afraid to be alone. They're insecure. And that is so crippling to allow your child to cling to something that's unhealthy. I think it's really healthy for kids to be able to break up. We've walked through that a couple of times with both Abby and Grant. And each time it's another set of conversations, and it's knowing when to break up, how to break up, because you're saying, look, this has been a great relationship. You're a great guy, but you're not for me. or you're a great girl, but this isn't a good relationship anymore because of these reasons. And so for your kids to be able to, with anything in their life, saying, okay, we've reached the point where it's unhealthy. It's time to walk away. And then letting your kids hurt and letting them recover with you. They're going to go into a relationship again at some point in the future, hopefully not right away. And I like that my kids have actually been hurt. And I like that they have recovered because I feel like they have learned more about themselves. And Abby's okay being alone.
When our kids were in high school, a book that was going around was I Kissed Dating Goodbye. That was really popular. And I don't know, sometimes books like that circulate and become like a teaching, like a truth. He has recanted his teachings and pulled the book from publication. But I think some of it, those were his beliefs and his opinion at that time, working for him. That's what worked for him. I don't necessarily fault him. I mean, maybe he shouldn't have written a book and made it so dogmatic. But there's some responsibility on the reader, too. And I know kind of as a young parent, I like formulas. I'm a math science person. So I always was looking like, just tell me what to do. And if I do this, then A, if I do A, B will happen. I was that kind of parent. I wanted that. And so I think it's just easy, any kind of book that you read like that, to take it at face value and to say, this is just one way of doing things. I felt a little bit of shame in our homeschool community because Andrew, he was dating in high school. And that just wasn't really popular. The biggest trouble that I had with that teaching was his whole emotional purity, that he felt like every relationship you were giving a piece of your heart away. And I think he even used an illustration at one point of like, on your wedding day for a girl, you've got all these boys lined up down the aisle that you've given your heart away to. And I just always kind of had trouble with that. Like, I don't really know that that's true. Like, you can recover from that. It's not like you're damaged goods because you get, and that's not how the heart works. Like it increase, like there's a limitless capacity for you to love. That just took hold in the churches and the homeschooling community. And just be careful when you read things like that. Like that is one person's opinion and you need to pick out the truths and throw out the rest.
No, it's so funny that you bring that up because that's exactly where my husband and I were when we very first got married. Of course, when you don't have children, you know everything. And but I mean, because we were in student ministry, obviously the topic was pretty prevalent at the time. The book was really popular, and a lot of our friends, parents of teens at the time were kind of taking that and going with it, And so that kind of shaped how we thought about dating at first. And we were like, yeah, absolutely no dating in high school. And it should, just all the things that he talked about in the book. That's kind of where we were at the time. It wasn't until we kind of saw them navigating those things. And not that we didn't like what we were seeing, but we just didn't really see the benefit necessarily of kind of how some of those relationships turned out, even though I really liked a lot of what he had to say.
Yeah, there's some good things.
And I feel kind of bad for him, honestly, when he recanted, because I felt like, he really felt strongly that he had caused harm. And I think like you, Julie, I think that we're responsible to read and eat the fish, spit out the bones, or whatever it is. So I feel bad that he feels so bad.
I know.
But I mean, I agree. It really did shape our church culture, certainly ours.
Did.
Yeah. I mean, there was a movement for
it
sure
was a
of
movement,
no
yes.
dating. And you were, if you allowed your child to date at that time, you were kind of looked down upon. Yeah.
I struggle with that. It was something else to say we don't do.
Right.
Right.
Well, it feels like a very easy way out as a parent, to be honest.
Well, it is.
And that's what I was looking for.
I would like
an easy way out.
I would really like to take this route because it would just take so much of the pressure off of me.
Oh, so many problems. Yeah, I struggled with that. I felt like people were saying, "Oh, you're choosing that way for your child," like I was sending them down this dark path,
right.
Because it was different. And so I just had to kind of listen and make sure I had confidence and believed in what we were doing and not just go on every whim. I just don't think there's one answer for anybody. Every family's different. Every child is different. Every situation's different.
It's so easy to parent shame, to shame one another, with anything that comes along. They'll come home and tell you. They're like, oh, well, my friend's doing this, or their parents are doing this, or why can't we do this? We're like, okay, well, let's talk about it. we would tell our kids and be honest up front, like, look, we're doing the best we can. First of all, we're not going to be perfect in this, but we're going to really try our best to navigate this with you. But here's why we're not going to do that. And we would talk about it and just.
I think it's like with anything. I mean, hopefully at this point, they've probably already kind of gone through other circumstances where, parent A, B, or C is allowing one thing and I'm allowing something different. And on both sides of those things, whether it's, can they wear a 2-piece bathing suit? Can they go, see certain movies or music or whatever? Navigating it with the child, to me, is the easy part. It's like you said, Julie, it's more navigating it with other parents and kind of having those differences and having to know, like, we can agree to disagree, and there's, you do you and I'll do me. And I think in general that gets easier anyways in parenting the older you get. I mean, I don't feel like the same amount of comparison with friends now as maybe when the girls were little, when you're, deciding whether you're going to homeschool or public school or all of those things. You felt more of the weight of their opinions. But now it's a little easier to kind of be like, well, this is what we're doing,
So, Tiana, I wanted to ask you some specific questions because you have had experience with so many teens over the years. What advice do you have for parents coming up on the teen years before they start dating?
I think the main thing with this is kind of what we talked about before. I think, Julie, you said having a plan is the main thing. Making sure your husband and you are on the same page way, way ahead of time before you ever get to this stage. And just kind of really talk through, what you would like to see, what you wouldn't like to see, what the boundaries are going to be. And then start having those conversations like we've talked about at an earlier age with your children as well.
Give us a little bit of background, like when you were in youth ministry, about how young did you kind of start to see that, hey, these relationships are starting to develop? Just so that parents can be aware of, like, what age does this start?
About 10 or 11.
Okay,
honestly.
So what grade is that, like 4th or 5th grade?
Fourth and 5th grade is when it heats up. Yes, I would say that's when they first notice each other. But I feel like that's really only a portion of the group. You know what I mean? Sure, it's like the rest are too embarrassed to talk about it, but you start seeing some. And I had one that started having crushes for sure in 4th or 5th grade, whereas the others are embarrassed at 7th grade, So, I mean, they're all different for sure, but definitely stuff starts heating up around that, 5th grade, 6th grade. You kind of visually can see in the youth group when they start noticing each other somewhere around 6th or 7th grade. It's pretty funny actually to watch all of a sudden, it's like more intermingling, and it's just a funny thing to watch. But yeah, I would say somewhere around there is when it starts. Doesn't mean your family has to start it then, but that's when it happens. Yeah.
Well, and I think that for parents out there, they may be thinking, oh, well, my kid's not really interested. Well, that doesn't mean that your kid in 4th grade is coming home and talking to you about it. But just to be aware that, hey, they could be going to youth group or to school, and this could really be something that's coming up. So maybe you want to broach the subject.
Yes. In fact, I think that kind of what Mindy said before, just asking about, are you crushing on anyone or that kind of thing. You don't necessarily want to encourage that behavior too young, but at the same time, you kind of have to make the first move, I think, in that, in opening that conversation.
I was really okay to talk about.
Yeah, I was really embarrassed to talk to my mom about that kind of stuff. And so not that it was unhealthy. I think it would have helped, for someone else to be the one to be like, so do you like anybody? And then I thought, oh, that's normal. That's okay. I don't think they're going to necessarily be the first one to tell you that kind of thing. So.
Right. So don't wait until your kid comes to you. What advice do you have for parents whose teens are already dating?
A lot of the same things that we talked about. I think, number one, be clued in. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen parents just sort of check out at this stage. And it's like, I don't know why of all the things. I don't know if it's just uncomfortable and there's not a set, equation, like Julie said. I don't know why that tends to happen, but I think that you have to be in touch. This is the main thing, really, to be engaged with. And we're all going to look at it different and do it differently. But remembering that you are the parent, you still are in control. You feed them. They have a place to stay in your house. You hold the key to a lot of things for them. And ultimately, I mean, I know that's not the reason that we parent with boundaries and that kind of thing, but ultimately you still have a lot of control. And, as trust is gained, there should be more freedom given and that kind of thing. But I feel like sometimes I see parents kind of giving up that manner of control when it comes to the dating relationships and just sort of, tossing their hands up and like, well, I don't know, kids are going to be kids or they're going to do what they're going to do. Well, no, we still have a say in a lot of that stuff. As far as being clued in, if your kid has a social media account, you need to have a social media account. They don't need to be on anything that you're not on. And I mean, be the troll. I'm not really good at being on Instagram, but my husband will do that for me. I want to see what the kids are commenting. And, even beyond dating, even just in their regular relationships, just talking them through even just basic social stuff. But particularly if they're dating, I mean, I think ultimately there's a manner of trust that has to be there. You're not going to be able to control everything. You're not going to be there with them every second of every day. But there's some things that we all should just be doing and being engaged. I think that there's healthy relationships in dating, but I see the families kind of accepting it too fast, too soon. So like I see a lot of times a godly girl, a godly boy, they do seem like a great couple and everybody's happy and both sides of the families are happy and it's great and wonderful. But I think kind of that puts a lot of pressure on the kids when they are coming to Christmas dinner and going on vacations with you and, doing these things like that. You've made them a part of your family at 15, 16. It puts them like a level of pressure on the relationship that I think it makes it hard to back out of. If one person wants to back out, it just makes it a whole big family and, friendship issue where maybe, the parents are almost placing more importance than the kids are on the relationship.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a fine line between accepting your teen's significant other and like wanting them to be around and be involved with, and then also the line of making your teen feel like, well, man, if I broke up, my parents would feel so disappointed. My siblings would be so disappointed. Well, they're such an entrenched part of our life, and that's too much pressure and too serious.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, that may happen.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think that's age
college.
Dependent.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's,
right.
Eventually they're going to be in a serious relationship that we're all happy with and we want to invite them into our lives. But too young can be a pitfall, I think.
What about some things that you've seen that you will incorporate into your girls' dating life? Were there things that you saw people do that you were like, oh, yeah, I definitely want to make a note of that and try and do that later?
One of the things that I would want to implement is just, again, making sure your child is still having that social life, being with other girls. I like to see in youth group where, the boyfriend and girlfriend's not always sitting together, silly things like that. Like, I want to see them have a manner of normalcy and it not detract from their teenage years, but only, makes it more fun or, more exciting, but not something that's going to, hold them back or isolate them, I think is a big thing too.
Well, yeah, because then if they break up, they don't have anybody.
Yeah. No.
They've dropped those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, the families that have their teenage friends and boyfriend and girlfriends or anybody, opposite sex or the like, at their house all the time. We've really tried to implement that. It's not always fun. I don't feel like cleaning my house after 40, 50 teenagers coming over. Sunday nights, we try to have like an open house policy with all the girls' friends from church, and it's great. But, honestly, it's not always convenient, especially with 4 teenage girls. I feel like every day someone's asking, if so-and-so can come over. And it's like, I feel like we just have this open door policy and it's great. I love it. But, it can be a sacrifice to do that. But you're going to gain so much just by knowing the kids that they're with. It just makes the decisions easier. All of it.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yeah. And I remember that was the hardest part to get used to when they first started dating, because it was like, oh, I just want to take a nap this afternoon, or I don't have my makeup on. And then by year 5, it's like she saw me just like I would roll out of bed, like she saw it all. Like she saw arguments between John and I. She knew what she was getting into when she married Andrew.
No, you want to apologize and say, I'm sorry, we live here, this is how we actually live.
But I loved having them at our house most of their dating life. Like,
yeah.
We got to know her. She got to know us, the siblings. And just even before that, just having kids at our house was always a good idea. I thought, it was just better that way.
Yeah,
and
for sure. Yeah.
What are some of the pitfalls that you're trying to avoid, Tiana? Because I'm sure that you've seen some.
just the too serious too soon, or maybe both extremes. I haven't particularly seen it work out well with all of someone's children to say absolutely no dating ever in this house. Usually somebody will break that mold at some point. It's not a matter of me not liking that idea. I kind of like that idea,
Right.
but I just hadn't seen it pan out. Like I felt like it usually worked with some of the kids, and then there was always one, or two that is like, no, I'm going to like somebody. And it's hard because you can make boundaries as far as where they are, what they do, who they spend time with, but you can't make boundaries of who they like. And if someone likes them and they like each other, I mean, it's semantics at that point as to whether they're dating or not. So I think that probably both extremes are a pitfall of either placing so much emphasis on the relationship that they've become part of your family and you've allowed it to get too serious too soon, but then also saying, kind of making it feel like it's a bad thing to want to date and saying absolutely no. Like I feel like somewhere in the middle is probably a happy place, but I can't pretend to say I know the balance there either. Like we're still figuring it out. So I don't know.
Right. I do think that we don't want to just say no dating and then this person leaves our house and has no experience and and we don't have any experience guiding them either at that point. We don't want to set our kids up almost for failure with relationships in college because they don't know how to navigate them on their own.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I've actually had older college age girls talk to me about that and say that they actually really, when they've not been allowed to date, I'm not saying all, don't hear me say that, but I have had several say they just don't know how to interact with a boy. They feel really uncomfortable being around boys. So I do think there's nothing magical that happens when they graduate high school and now are on their own. So we need to, at some point, and in all areas, start preparing them for that adulthood. And so to me, it's just one of those areas that it's happening. You can't starve them off from that forever. It's going to happen.
And you may have run into this, but I was talking with my daughter and then my son's girlfriend. They're not that far removed from the teen dating life. They were saying that, because I was kind of talking to them about my younger girls. My younger girls are kind of giving me some pushback on having, supposedly I'm behind the times on whether they can date or not letting them do enough. And, we're having this discussion a lot in our house. And I was asking them what they thought. And they said that they've had so many of their friends say to them, both of them had boundaries as far as dating went. So many of their friends say, I wish my parents would have asked me more questions or paid more attention or had some more boundaries. Sometimes your kid's not going to thank you for that when they're actually in the teen years. But when you talk to older girls, a lot of times they are thankful for having some guidance and having some parental involvement in this process. Have you seen that with girls that you've talked to later, Tiana?
I mean, I think generally speaking, teenagers are wanting boundaries in their life. I think they really want you to show them that you love them by caring enough to put those boundaries in place. And I do think it's a thankless job, and I don't think you're necessarily going to hear that. But talk to any teenage girl that's been in foster care or a situation where they don't have parents, and they will tell you, and they have told me, that they just want rules. They would give anything to have that. And so I think that deep down, all of them feel that way. And honestly, even that, I think going back to like the specifics of talking about uncomfortable things, the physical aspect is a big deal. It's not the only important thing, but it is a big deal. And so to say specifically, let's put this boundary way over here. Julie, you said, like, let's not get all the way close to that line. Let's stay as far away from it as possible so that if you mess up, there's still a way to recoup that and to, be safe. So just talking, with them, what that looks like. And honestly, talking, and, my children would kill me if they heard me say this, but just talking about the physical things that happen in your body, you know what I mean? And teaching them that, your body doesn't go from 0 to 80, in a 3 second. There's things that you can do to make sure that you're not in a situation where you end up going too far. I tell them all the time, you don't go from holding hands to getting pregnant.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of steps in between. And so let's keep it way, way, way far over there. And so that you don't realize you're in a situation where your body's taking over and your mind is completely checked out.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, just talking
yeah.
about those, being able to talk about those things.
Those can be hard
for sure.
conversations to have.
It's horrible.
Parents aren't just born knowing how to talk about that.
I know.
Right.
Well, I mean, again, I think like working with students all these years, it has been easier for me to talk to them, than my own kids sometimes. But
well,
it's
because
funny,
as parents, we really want the youth pastor and his wife just to have this conversation. What else are we paying you for? Please have this conversation.
Do you think your kids see you maybe with a little more knowledge because of your jobs or not? Like that you maybe have a little more relevance or authority in that area?
I do think some. They see girls, we joke about it, but it's like they see their friends and older girls that they respect liking me or hanging out with me voluntarily. But I think when they see their friends interacting with us on the regular, which could be anybody, not just somebody who's working in student ministry, but if you're having them over a lot and they see that their friends like you.
Sure.
And you're treating them the same way. Like you're telling them these same things.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Anyone who's ever been in my Sunday school class will have had these conversations.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. I think we're all kind of, we're all in the mix right now. So.
Yeah, I would be interested to have you on in like 5 years, Tiana, after all four of your girls have gone through the dating process.
No.
Yeah,
I'm going to need therapy probably by then. I don't know. I think one of the things I feel like I've failed to mention that I should have, I think like when we talk to our girls or I talk to teenagers, I always tell them that if there is any reason this person I don't care if you're 13 years old, okay? If there is a reason why this person would be discounted for you as a potential mate someday, marriage-wise, then that's not someone we're dating. Just because someone ticks all the boxes, is godly, treats you right, is hardworking as a leader, that doesn't mean you're definitely going to marry that person or that you'll want to. But at least okay, well, those things are covered. If one of those things is not there, we're not going to get into the relationship. And I think that is a pitfall that I have seen time and time again is, the teenager is not going to make that mature decision on their own. They're just not. And so that is our job as a parent to say, you know what, you guys are not on the same page, spiritually, spiritual maturity wise. This guy does not have to be perfect in the end all. I don't have to know that my kid's going to marry them. But at the same time, if there is something right off the bat, we know this is not a potential mate.
Right.
We're not going to let them date them. And because honestly, I have seen way too many people stay together and get married. And then now we're in a relationship that is, not matched spiritually at all.
Right.
So,
yeah. I think that I've always tried to approach it that you're not going to change someone,
no.
And so many girls, I don't know about boys, but particular girls, they'll take on a project or they'll think they can change someone and you can't do that. And I think talking with your girls about that and just calling that what it is and then not letting them fall into that pit.
And they're not going to necessarily see if someone is acting spiritual to appease them. But as a parent, I think you can see through it a lot easier. So.
Yes.
I do think part of the equation that I would not want to miss is do the best you can to have other adults in your child's life that is speaking the same language as you are. Doesn't mean they're going to have the exact same standards about it or whatever, but, just leaders, Sunday school teachers, different people that they respect. They are going to listen to them, of course, more than they listen to us. So I think that's really powerful in your
that really
life.
is.
Yes. Try to encourage those relationships because they are so valuable. I think the teen dating years can be fun. And they can be something that's healthy, and it can be something that we thrive in as a family. But I do think that it takes a lot of talking and a lot of thinking and a lot of prayer. Well, Tiana, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun to get to talk to you. And
so fun.
Yeah.
we really enjoy hearing your perspective. And I mean, you may not think you have much wisdom on this subject, but you really do.
Yeah, it was neat to hear. I loved hearing all that you had to say.
Oh, well, you could have asked me on something easier. That's what I said when you asked. You asked me on the one thing I really don't know exactly the answer to, but that's okay.
And hopefully we can have you on again to talk about another one of our interesting teenage topics.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you later,
Bye,
Tiana.
ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
Friends, we're so glad you joined us today. If you enjoy Midlife Matters, we hope you'll tell a friend. Show them how to find us on their phone and hit the free subscribe button so that they never miss an episode. They can also download and listen to each episode right from our website, midlifematterspodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Midlife Matters Podcast. You can also email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday. Bye.